Hello everybody, it's Andy here talking to you today about the Tau Codex. A lot of people ask me, they say, Andy, you're a guy that's never played a game of 9th edition, 2K points. Tell me how to play this army. And I say, sure, of course I will. If you subscribe to my page, no, I don't tell them that. I say, I don't know what you're talking about, but I do have the rules, so let me help you. And guys, today I am going to tell you exactly how to play this codex. Kind of. What I mean by kind of is I'm not going to tell you because I don't know anything, and I actively admit that. But what I am going to do is get somebody that knows what they're talking about onto the channel so that they can tell you, whilst I basically sit here and twiddle my thumbs. Now, before I introduce you to the undisputed Tau Master, the pure-tide engram chip to your Chasui Fire Warrior, I would first like to say that if you are watching this on Glass Half Dead, I am going to continue 40k content on this channel for another month, but then it stops, and it will be over on my actual 40k channel, Tilt Tactics Tabletop. So subscribe there and watch this video there as well, please, thank you. But now we have the man himself, Invasive Wargaming. Go and check him out. He is all about Tau in 40k. He knows everything. He's been playing them for years. He's continuing to play them, and he's hyped because he now has a really good codex. So whilst I sit here and play the fool, he is going to explain everything to you. Invasive Wargaming. As I cracked this bad boy open, I was very confused. There's so many rules in this guy. Like, oh my gosh, this is dense. And like, there's not even, you know, the old editions of codexes, they used to have like, they would do a rundown of every single unit and all the fluff for every, no, it's gone. This is all rules. This is a thick boy filled with rules. Let's start right at the beginning, Invasive Wargaming. Montka and Kauyon. Now I'm just going to assume that these are fluffy words with some sort of in-universe meaning. But when I'm faced with this entire... This is it. What is this? Reanimation protocols for Necrons? Please tell me what all of this means without making me have to read an entire page.
So at the beginning of the game, right after you determine who goes first, you get to choose either Montka or Kauyon, and these are the two tactical philosophies that you can choose from as a Tau player. Montka is the much more aggressive one. It's named the killing blow for a reason, and it allows you in turns 1, 2, and 3 to advance and shoot, or otherwise just move without penalty. You can move and count as remaining stationary, and then also you get improved AP and ability to re-roll some of your wounds at decreasing ranges in each of those turns. So it starts off at 18 inches and works its way down after that. Kauyon, on the other hand, is called the Patient Hunter. And so that's a more conservative strategy. It's focused more about setting traps and biding your time until the end of the game, when then you can make some really powerful moves. So in turns 3, 4, and 5, it allows you to fall back and shoot out of combat, and then also allows you to get extra hits when you roll a 6 or 5 or 4 in each of those turns respectively. So they both have really strong applications, especially with some of the stratagems that we'll talk about later, but Montka is certainly the more aggressive one, where you're looking to push the midfield right away, and Kauyon is the one where you're sitting back and shooting a little bit more, not necessarily contesting that midfield as strongly on turn 1.
Okay, sure. Offensive, defensive. I get it. Makes sense. Now you may find a theme in what I'm asking here, but Invasive Wargaming, what in the warp are Septs? And I do not have time to read the entire Relics and Stratagems page. Give me a quick rundown, please.
For my favorite Sept, I'd go with Borkan right at the beginning here. Borkan allows you to extend the range of your weapons by 4 inches, and it also makes your suits and vehicles a little bit more durable. It says that, strength 7 and lower shots against them are -1 strength. So it has really clear implications for making your shooting more effective and making some of your key players more durable, which is always a good thing, right? And so on paper, Borkan seems really strong, but I think there are some strong contenders in both Dalith and Sakia, which are two other septs that really haven't got attention in previous editions. But here, Dalith allows your auxiliary units, your Kroot and your Vespid, to use your tactical philosophy, Montka or Kauyon, and that could make them really punchy, really scary for a really low price tag, which could be good. And then also Sakia allows you to have much better control over objectives. And of course, 9th edition is a game about controlling objectives. And so Sakia allows you to do that more effectively. And so probably also has a really strong argument to be made for it. So I think right now we're seeing Borkan as the clear favorite, but the more tactical options may be those other septs that unlock a little bit more subtle of an effect. As far as a relic goes, I think the Humble Stave is really a critical piece of equipment. This is something that allows your Ethereal to cast multiple invocations of the elements. And each of those invocations are, frankly good, but there are some that are just chef's kiss, really nice. And it allows you to cast 2 of those as opposed to just 1. And so that is a huge force multiplier, especially when we consider some of the stratagems that we could use, or relics or prototype systems that we could use on top of those buffs. You can unlock some really nasty combos using that ethereal, and being able to do that twice in a turn, that's money. As far as a warlord trait goes, some of the sept specific ones are really, really good, especially if we're looking at those 3 septs I just mentioned. But more generally, I think Through Boldness Victory is a strong pick. It makes 6's auto wound for a nearby unit, and so that's always useful, right? If you are always auto wounding on a 6 for some unit, like let's say you have a big crisis suit blob, right? That's good. That's good at short range. That's good at long range. It's not really context dependent, and so it's reliable. And in my mind, reliability means that it's useful.
Ethereals have invocations. This feels like it's brand new, but I probably just don't know, right? My understanding is that chaplains and priests get these. They're like psychic powers, kind of. They're buffs, right? Now there's 6 here, and you can pick 2, and then you roll, and sometimes they're inspired. What do I do with an ethereal?
Yeah, so like I said, I think all of them are good. The ones that I'm going to be prioritizing are Zephyr's Grace, which means that if your unit moved, it has -1 to hit. So that is really useful. It basically makes any of your battle suits into stealth suits. And then Sense of Stone gives them a 5-up Feel No Pain roll. And then Wisdom of the Guides generates a CP for you. So all those, super awesome. It's almost to the point where I think bringing multiple ethereals is not a bad idea. They're cheap. They're characters. You can hide them easily, and they go into Devilfish just great. So having these invocations of the elements, I think, is a huge boon to any army, and getting at least those 3 out every turn is going to be really valuable.
Right. Do you even need me to ask the question when it comes to stratagems? Invasive Wargaming, help me.
So this one's a little bit more complicated. There are a lot of stratagems in here that are very strong if you are bringing the relevant units. And so if we're talking about what you should keep in mind for every game, then the list is a shorter list, right? The things that you're going to want to keep in mind for every game are things like Savior Protocols, which allows you to essentially do the old Savior Protocols mechanic for any unit. So you have, a Hammerhead, let's say. You can use your Savior Protocol stratagem to have drones nearby it, within 3 inches, soak wounds for that Hammerhead. That's something that's totally unique to this new Codex, not something that we've ever seen before, is the ability to have drones intercept hits for a vehicle. And it's, a really strong mechanic on something that would otherwise be fairly easy to remove from the tabletop. So Saber Protocols, definitely something you want to keep in mind. Even if you have a bunch of drones embedded in units, having saber protocols to have those drones help out their next door neighbor is a great thing. Coordinated engagement allows 2 units to pick a target that's within 18 inches of them, and all their shots are now -1 AP against them, or +1 AP. Their AP is 1 better than it was before, which is really powerful for basically any circumstance, but especially if you're thinking about some of those lower AP weapons that could really get a big step up from having just 1 extra point. So if we're talking about carbines on Pathfinders or rifles on strike teams, having the ability to just throw on an extra AP on top of that is really good and synergizes extremely well with Montka, right? If Montka is giving you +1 AP and this gives you +1 AP, now suddenly your pulse rifles, which are normally AP -1 thanks to this new book, are now AP -3. And that's some pretty nasty output there. The last stratagem that I'm going to pick is Strike and Fade, and this is essentially the old jump, shoot, jump mechanic. It's a carryover from the previous Codex, and it allows you to take a jetpack unit, like a battlesuit, and fire it at the beginning of the shooting phase, but then move 6 inches away. So this is something that is valuable in the way that 6 inches can get you further away from an opponent if you are trying to avoid a charge, or it can get you closer to an objective if you're trying to get to one, or it can get you behind obscuring terrain if you are next to it. So having that ability to jump that extra 6 inches after you shoot is super useful, and also means that you can move into position to do something like Montka, and then use this to jump back away, so you're getting kind of the best of both worlds. Super useful. It can be a little cost intensive, and you can't use it for all your suits, of course, but if you have one focal unit that you're really trying to make some plays with, this is an absolute must.
Honestly, stratagems are always so dense for me to go through, so thank you for that. Let's finally get into some data sheets. We have the HQ first, obviously. Let's do, you pick one that is your favorite, and I pick one that is my favorite. You're the pro, so I assume that your one is correct, but I'm going to give you mine in the form of a beginner, to which it is the Cadre Fireblade. Stick him within 6 inches of a Fire Warrior squad, preferably 2, and they get better. And I believe that in this codex, as we're about to talk in troops, Fire Warrior is pretty okay. So this is actually solid and easy to remember. What's your pick?
So I'm going to pick the Enforcer, and the reason why I'm going to say the Enforcer and not the Ethereal is because we've already talked about the Ethereal enough. I think it's almost an auto-include in most armies. And so the Enforcer is going to be my pick for favorite here. And that's for 2 reasons. One is that the Enforcer is a commander, and although it's not particularly points efficient for a firing platform, it is reliable. Again, so it's going to be hitting on 2s, and so that means that it's a reliable platform for some of these really powerful prototype weapons that you can take in this new book. And so if you have a prototype weapon that you have to really make sure it hits, a commander is the way to do it. That's true for all the commanders. The thing that makes the Enforcer special is its other abilities, which one of them is to give crisis suits the objective secured ability, which is super powerful because battle suits in general are much better at contending objectives in this new codex, and giving them the ability to be objective secured on top of that is just cherry on top. It really makes battle suits a viable mechanism for Tau to take and hold objectives. So I think that's a super powerful ability. The Enforcer also has some other things, like it allows nearby core units to reroll 1s to hit, and it reduces the incoming damage that it takes by 1 as well. So those are all really strong things that make the Enforcer a very solid component of a battlesuit themed list.
On to the troops. There's only 3. And I think that troops are obviously very important to understand. So I'm just going to let you handle all 3 data sheets. What's going on with the troops?
All right, so there was a time when we only had 2 options. So 3 options is not bad. It's certainly better. But the strike teams is kind of like your basic fire warrior. They can either have rifles or carbines. You're probably just going to see rifles still, which are strength 5, -1 AP, rapid fire. And so they can put out a ton of shots and do so at range that are pretty punchy, especially given some of the stratagems and other buffs that we've already talked about. I think there's enough support for them to make them the most reliable option of the three in terms of damage output. Like, they do put out a good amount of shots, and then on top of it, you have the different buffs and the stratagem. So I think that they are probably going to be the way to go most of the time. Your counterpart to that is the Breacher. And the Breacher is kind of the close quarters variant of a strike team. They have blasters, which are essentially pulse shotguns. They're still hitting twice. They're assault 2, but they have increasing strength and AP based on how close you are. So if you're at 14, you have a little bit weaker profile. If you're at 8 inches, you have a little bit stronger profile. And they look on paper to be the more effective choice, but again, they're limited in that range. So that makes them a little bit harder to use. And that can be a liability once you get into the later turns of the game. So I think Breachers are still a very strong choice, but not the exclusive option, right? It used to be last edition that you basically just wanted to bring Breachers, and I think that now they are less influential in this book than they were back then. Your third option is Kroot, and Kroot are cheap and just scrappy little buggers. So they do a lot for their price. And you certainly should be taking them if you're running Dal'Lith. If you take Dal'Lith, you're extending your tactical philosophy to your Kroot, and that's where I think they really shine. Outside of Dal'Lith, there's still a role for them. It's just diminished. They don't have the same allure as they would if you're taking Dal'Lith, but they are still cheap. They're still good at screening. They're still good at getting some mid-board control on turn 1 because of this pregame movement that they have, and they can put out a fair number of lower quality shots. So again, they have a role, but they are not as punchy as the Fire Warrior versions, unless you're taking Dal'Lith.
Okay, now I keep an eye out online, and obviously on Warcom, they posted a stratagem that the Devilfish can use. Emergency debarkation. Sounds really good. So let's talk about Devilfish. How are we using them? I see that they're now completely out of stock everywhere due to their perceived goodness. How many am I buying?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this too. It's basically the thing that's going to facilitate mechanized Tau armyless. So Devilfish with Fire Warriors inside of them is something that you're going to see because of this stratagem. And what it does is, for 1 CP, it allows you to do a normal move with the Devilfish and then disembark. That's not normally how it works, right? Normally you have to get out of the Devilfish first and then the Devilfish can move. So this means that who's ever inside that Devilfish can get a lot more movement in any turn that you use this stratagem. And what's more is that if you choose Montka, you can do this with 3 Devilfish, not just 1, on turns 1 through 3. And if you choose Kauyon, you can do it with 3 Devilfish on turns 3 through 5. So for 1 CP, you get to move and disembark with 3 Devilfish in accordance with your tactical philosophy, which is great for Montka because it means that you can get those Fire Warriors up close and personal right away so that you're within range to benefit from that ability, right? So that you can get that -1 AP, so you can get that reroll to wound. So that's super valuable because those units otherwise might not be able to really get into range for some of your more premium targets. For Kauyon, it's useful because it allows you to quickly move around the board and grab those objectives when you want to. Right at the end of the game, you're able to hop in Devilfish, move around, disembark, grab an objective in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you had to foot slog it across the board on turn 4 or 5. So a very powerful stratagem no matter what your tactical philosophy is, but certainly it's basically a requirement if you're bringing Fire Warriors and going with a Montka strategy.
Now, in pretty much every single book, every faction has good elite slots. But in Tau, You've got your battle suits. You've got your crisis battle suits. You've got your ghost keel. You've got your stealth suits. I'm just going to let you handle this one. Thank you.
Yeah, elites are kind of a weird section in this book. And the reason why I say it's weird is because it's still really competitive in the way that all the elites choices are good in some way, right? And that's been the case, right? Like you've always had a really competitive elite slot. Historically, that was looking at the Riptide compared to everything else. Now the Riptide's a heavy support, so that's not an issue. But still, the elites choices are all good in some way. It's weird because the crisis suits just seem like they are by far the best choice. They are just very strong for a variety of reasons. One of those is that they can take a variety of weapons, and so you can specialize them to whatever role you need in your army. On top of that, you can unlock some pretty nasty combos using the different commanders, using the buffs from ethereals, using the different relics and prototype weapons. So there is a lot you can do with a single unit of crisis suits that can make it really scary for any opponent unit and also extremely durable. So I think crisis suits really shine in this book, and so they are definitely the first elite choice I think people should take. If you're looking outside of crisis suits, stealth suits are good because, again, they synergize with crisis suits by means of a homing beacon that allows them to deep strike turn 1. But ghost keels are also really appealing in the way that their drones make them non-targetable outside of 18 inches. So you can have a ghost keel sitting on an objective and just not get shot. And, that's something, right? So I think there's play for ghost keel as kind of a utility pick, not necessarily an offensive pick. And that's consistent with how it has been in the past. It's never been a big damage dealer. It's always been something that's more about strategy and less about killing power. And I think that's still true, and it's a good choice in there. So crisis suits and ghost keels, I think, are my favorite two in the elite slot right now.
Moving on to the fast attack, which is your one favorite?
Fast attack is also a really interesting section in this book. It used to be that fast attack was basically, this is where you're going to put all your shield drones. Don't bother with shield drones in tactical drone units in this book. You will want to use your fast attack slots for something else. Probably Pathfinders. Pathfinders are a great source of marker lights because they can move, do the marker light action, and then fire their weapons that they have. Other marker light sources generally have to do the marker light action and can't move. So that's a huge boon there, is that they can actually move and do marker lights. And the special weapons that they have are super points efficient, very punchy. Rail rifles, ion rifles, super punchy. And so you'll probably want some of those in there as well. Vespid, man, they are taking their time in the light with this codex. They are super points efficient and are designed basically to punch right through Primaris Marines. And so they have a strength 5, -3 AP, damage 2, assault 2 weapon. And so they can just blow right through Marines and basically anything else, right? Like anything else, that's still a very reasonable profile to use against. So Vespid are kind of good across the board, but they are especially good at that, toughness 4, toughness 5 range of a target. So Pathfinders and Vespid, both very good, dynamic, punchy units, but weak, right? And that's kind of consistent with what you would think about a fast attack unit, right? That fast attack shouldn't be the most durable unit, but should have some punching power, and these guys do.
Oh man, honestly, heavy support equally. There's so many good options here. For me, broadside battle suits. They just look so good. I love them. If I've remembered to edit this video correctly, I've put a picture of mine up right here on the screen because they're so good. What's your favorites from the heavy support slot?
Okay, so I might shock some people here. If you're easily startled, you may want to sit down, have a glass of water or something. The pick that I'm going to go with for heavy support is not the Hammerhead. It's broadsides. So the Hammerhead is scary and very effective against things, especially if they have a invulnerable save. But I think it's still fairly easily dealt with. The broadside is comparably, if not more efficient, with a heavy rail rifle and plasma rifle loadout. And it's a suit, and it's infantry, and it can have drones, which means that in general, it's much more survivable than a Hammerhead. So it's harder to deal with. So I think that broadsides are really where it's at, or at least a combination of Hammerheads and broadsides are going to be a common pick because they're both very good, but you can use broadsides in a different way than you can Hammerheads, and I think that way is generally going to be the more versatile one and the more flexible one depending on the game you're playing.
Now, there are only 2 flyers, and I believe that flyers are not currently in vogue in 40k, unless you're AdMech, but that got nerfed. If I wanted to take a flyer, which one am I taking?
Yeah, the flyers are always strange, right? Like, they are produced during this time when Games Workshop was like, every faction needs a flyer. We're doing flyers now. Everybody, figure out how to put wings on this thing. And so both the flyers are kind of mediocre. Is the word I'll use. The Sunshark is by far the better of the two. It has a pulse bomb generator that drops bombs that do mortal wounds, and that's great. But that role is largely replaced by the Hammerhead, which is probably a much better pick than a Sunshark bomber. So, and then the Razor Shark is just kind of not good. It has ion rifles. You can get ion rifles other ways. It doesn't actually have the right number of shots for the number of ion rifles it has. This is probably the worst pick in the book, I think. The Razor Shark, always has been, always will be. If you have one of these, they look cool, but yeah.
I'm not even going to talk about the fortifications, so let's just go straight to the Lord of War, the Storm Surge. This guy's obviously an absolute beast in the datasheet, but am I actually taking him?
Maybe. Maybe you're going to take a Storm Surge. The thing about the Storm Surge is that it's a Lord of War, and so you have to take in an auxiliary detachment unless you're going to bring 3, and if you do that, then it doesn't get your Sept benefits, and it's just, one big model that's going to sit in one place and shoot, and it's very good at that. It's surprisingly good at that, actually. If you look at the math, it actually comes out in favor of the Storm Surge being one of the more efficient choices across the board, depending on your loadout. Generally, the blast cannon is going to be the better one to pick, but the driver cannon also has play. So you could go either way. They're both going to have strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, I think that you're probably better off building a list around some of the other choices than the Storm Surge itself. The counterfire defense system is a stratagem that was previewed by Warhammer community. That is a huge component of why you might want to bring a Storm Surge, is that you can have the counterfire defense system on the Storm Surge, and that can basically wipe out any damage that it takes. So you're from a shot. So I think that alone is probably a much better argument for the Storm Surge than any of its weapons in particular. That you're just going to have this thing that's putting out tons of shots and sitting somewhere on the board that your opponent's going to have to deal with. And so it's kind of a distraction Carnifex would be the archetype that we're talking about here, but it's an annoying Storm Surge, let's say. Right? It's going to be putting out a lot of shots. Some of those are going to be really painful for your opponent, and they're going to have to figure out some way to deal with it. So it's really more of a style choice, a play style choice, I think, than one necessarily of the raw numbers.
Thank you so much for taking me through the entire Codex, and hopefully the audience thanks you as well. Everybody, that was Invasive Wargaming. Do you want to say a quick word, Invasive?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like I said, it was a lot of fun talking about this stuff. If folks want to talk about more Tau, that's like all I do. So head on over to my channel and check it out.
Amazing help, great channel. Go and check it out right now, guys. Everybody, this is the end of my Tau Empire Codex review or guidance, I suppose. I hope this has helped you. If it hasn't, you're unhelpable. If it hasn't, then both myself and Invasive Wargaming are going to have more Tau videos coming out very soon. I'd like to thank you for sticking around to the end of this video, and again, if you like 40k content, go and check me out on Tilt Tactics Tabletop. A bit sparse on content right now, but that's because I'm still getting things set up. Anyway, that's been me and Invasive Wargaming, all about the new Tau. Guys, you do need to know this codex because they are going to be everywhere very quickly. Oh my god. And just to round things off, everybody, I hope you've had a good day and continue to have a good day. For the greater goodbye.